item 11, the Otākāro Avon River Corridor CEAT funded bridge project. And Andrew, welcome to the table. The report is clear, but are there any further comments that you wanted to make before we move to questions?
No, I don't believe there are. I think we've got the team here to answer any questions. So,
all right, yeah. Thank you. So let's move straight into any questions, if there are any. Aaron.
Yeah, given the significance of these bridges to earthquake history, the reason why they're being replaced, where the funds come from, everything, how earthquake resistant are they? I didn't see that in the design at this point.
So they've been designed to be to a high level of resilience in terms of seismic activity. So I don't think the detailed design information was included there, but they've all got very deep piles, with the aim being that there'll be minimal remedial work required in the event of a large seismic activity or event. So
just note there too that obviously they'll have to meet our current building code standards for earthquake resilience.
Yeah, so there's obviously when both sides of the bank move separately, it's not good for something that's joining on. If they're locked in, won't that be a problem again?
No,
or they snap off and just...
Yeah, so the geotech conditions are slightly different at each of the sites, but they're designed in such a way that they can shear off, separate from...
Oh, so they will, and then you just come in, lift them back into place.
Yeah, correct.
Okay, cool.
So the bridges themselves will be designed to be reusable after an event.
Great. And are they prefabricated and brought in?
That'll be a discussion with the contractors, but it's quite probable that they will be.
And why are they so expensive?
A lot of the cost is in ensuring that resilience and the tie-in with the stop banks now and in the future, and allowing for the flood rise. So they're going to sit considerably above the existing stop banks to allow for their future expansion. So there's a lot of cost there. Those are the primary drivers.
Right, and with that height thing, was consideration not given to a design where you can just add as the sea level changes?
The design does allow for that, so they can be increased further, but given what the modelling tells us currently, I mean, it can be done, but there'll be a cost with that, so we're building it into the initial construction rather than having to come along and do that later.
Okay, just, yeah, $4 million per walk bridge is just seems like a phenomenal amount of money.
Yeah, well, hopefully we get deliver it well within that, get good pricing from the market.
Thank you. Phil and then Sam. Phil.
Yeah, thanks guys. I can understand why you've gone to timber, away from timber to steel. My question is it that important to have the deck made of concrete? Because that must mean that the structure has to be one hell of a lot stronger to support the weight of the concrete.
During the design process, there was thought given to timber, but ultimately, from a construction and resilience point of view and maintenance as well.
What I was just asking, if there was no concrete, how much cheaper could we make the spans because it'd be able to be a bit lighter construction because there's nowhere near as much weight? Could that be done?
You would need to take into account, as Kent was pointing out, the additional operational costs that would be incurred with timber. So what Kent was trying to say is these are CEAT funded projects, they're not ratepayer funded projects. So there's a strategic decision to minimise the cost on ratepayers going forward, so to build to a resilient standard. So yes, you can always build something cheaper at the capital cost point, but we must then look at the ongoing operational cost impacts year on year. So the point Kent's trying to make is, at this point, the decision is to
Okay.
take the lowest cost, long-term approach.
And one last question, these 3 bridges will go out separately for tender, or they'll go as
No,
one block?
one tender package.
So
Yeah.
one company in the long run will build all 3?
Well, depending on how the market
Potentially.
responds, but yeah,
Potentially.
that's,
Normally, in a tender like that, we would always retain the ability to divert from a single package if a better cost solution.
So, sorry,
Presented
no, I'm
itself.
not said it properly. It's going out as a group, but
As a
3
package.
different people could end up building the bridges.
That's not the intent at this point.
Right, okay, sorry.
The advice that we've been given is that we're most likely going to receive a better financial return as a single package.
Okay, yeah,
But like I say, we always protect our right to divert.
thank you.
Thank you. Sam and then Yanni.
Just
Sam.
a quick one. So we go out with a package for the 3 bridges, which is fine. What happens if it comes in under budget? Like, what happens to do we have to give that money back to anyone, or does that just go into the council kitty? Like, what's the incentive for us to get the best deal in the market?
that'll be a discussion with the Earthquake Appeals Trust, and we've had that initial conversation with them. They won't commit to anything at this point, but they've indicated, well, they've conveyed that they're very supportive of this wider OARC program, and that they'd be open to speaking to us about how any potential surplus could be applied.
So it's likely if we could drive the price down, we'd have money for something else?
Potentially, but they're reserving the right to
Yeah.
discuss that.
Yeah. I'm just trying to work what the incentive is for us to get the best deal out.
Well, I guess ultimately we're always looking to get the most cost-effective outcome. So I think what we've got here is a balance where we've got a fit-for-purpose design that Andrew, as Andrew says, represents the best long-term cost proposition to the council, and then any discussion about a surplus will occur
Ultimately,
once we know what the
the
numbers are.
determination of the criteria in a tender will either favour price or not. It's highly likely that this one will have quite a high element of evaluation against cost, and that will essentially predetermine that the best price is going to be the most
Yep.
significant factor.
And so just the only other one that's probably complete contrary to that is if it does exceed that budget, do you come back to council for more money, or?
Yes, we'd have to report to council that we cannot achieve what you've
So it wouldn't
resolved
automatically
upon
be-
with the current budget.
So it wouldn't automatically be reprioritised, you'd have to come back for more money, depending on, I guess, the level of what that would exceed.
First thing we do is look at the design, work with the contractor to look to get it within the budget.
Okay, yep,
But if that wasn't able to be achieved, yes, we're obliged to come back to council.
sure, okay, thank you.
Thank you. Yanni.
What's the cost to maintain the wooden bridges versus the ones that are proposed?
Well, I'm not sure that we've actually gone and done that evaluation. What Ken talked about was the decision was to, in the design of the concept and the associated cost estimation report that you have at your disposal there, looked at the best long-term impact. And it's a known fact that concrete is going to have a lower ongoing operational cost requirement than timber in that environment.
So I just wanted to check if we'd done any assessment of the carbon footprint of the different materials.
I'm not sure that that's been quantified. Certainly it's part of the discussion, but I'm not sure that it's been
So is there anything, like, we've obviously declared a climate change emergency, is there anything that we've considered in terms of sustainability around the procurement or the design of these bridges that would reduce our impact on?
So the detailed design of the bridges hasn't been completed yet, so the technical details, so that certainly can be included. And in terms of the procurement, it is always included. And so the procurement plan will require tenderers to present their information related to sustainability to be evaluated.
Do we have any sense of the difference environmental cost of using concrete and steel versus wood?
Not at this time, but if there's, if not quantified, but if council want us to include that in the technical design elements, that's something we can look into.
I was just interested, the submissions talked about the Snell Bridge having a name change. Did you consider that? Any reflection back on those requests?
Thank you. So a couple of the submissions on the feedback did ask about whether or not athletes could be recognised in the area. We don't, as far as I'm aware, have a sort of like a tendency to name bridges. All of those bridges are referenced in relation to where they are in location rather than a name themselves, and we haven't got any plans at the moment to look to name to those bridges. If we did go down that track, I imagine there would be something that we would look to mana whenua to guide us on.
I mean, I just thought in terms of like the other two, Avondale and Midway, you know, that I don't think people were concerned, but just on that Snell one, would we be able to consider a process to engage the community around the naming?
It was not significant feedback that we received on that in terms of numbers. There was a couple of pieces of feedback, but it's not something that I would necessarily have triggered a subsequent engagement with the community on, given that it wasn't brought up by a lot of people as part of this engagement process.
But it was brought up with from the residents group, right? Which would represent a number of people.
Again, naming the bridges is not something that we were looking at doing as part of this, and we would be following council processes on naming if we were to do so.
Yeah, okay, cool. Final question was, and you know, obviously the cost issue for some of us is a concern. I'm just wondering how we register our opposition to the quantum but support the bridges. Is there a way we can do that? And the other thing was the accessibility. I just want to be really clear that we do have a barrier-free audit and that we make sure that they are designed as accessible as possible, like world-class accessibility rather than just minimum standard. So is there anything you can say that would reassure us around that?
So there's been conversations with the Disability Advisory Group who have had input particularly into the ramps approaching the bridge. So there has been those discussions take place already. I'm not sure.
Is there going to be like a formal record of like their feedback and what changes are made as a result?
Yep, we'll have that. We can provide that.
Okay. Yeah. I don't.
Those processes are normal design processes for all of our projects. Not
I
specific to
understand
this.
that,
So,
but we've had I don't know how many times people coming in here saying brand new builds, and we're not seemingly getting it right. So, well, no, it's actually the organisation's responsibility.
All right, so Yanni, have you got a specific question for staff?
Yeah, I mean, can we have a formal process to ensure that these are as accessible as possible, and that we do have an understanding of
sure, we'll record
the design?
We'll record the sign off from the Disability Advisory Group of the design.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I've got Aaron and then Phil. Aaron.
Oh, it's just back on the weight thing, like with concrete, that with its seismic resilience, wood's obviously a lot better than concrete. So with the use of concrete, obviously the weight of the bridge itself is going to affect the supports on either side considerably, because you've got that heavy shaking before it snaps off or goes wherever, and the also the structure of the bridge itself has got to be so much heavier. For concrete's 2.5 tonne a cubic metre, and there's a few cubic metres of concrete in there. So is that not weighed up in the cost? And I think it said in there that you only replace the wood, it's got a 50-year life, so you'd only replace it once in the 100 years, and each bridge has got a $900,000 maintenance on it anyway, per bridge, for its life.
So the question is,
Well, is those considerations used in the, like, because the Alpine, yeah, okay, yes it is then. So it'll obviously in the Alpine fault, none of those things are going to fall in with the weight of the bridge because it's a lot heavier structure on top of those things. I mean, we are told the Alpine fault will go.
I'm a little bit confused about the question that you're asking.
Yeah. So
The question he's asking is, should we not be using wood instead
Oh,
of
sorry,
concrete?
I
because
forgot
of
we
the
meant to have
earthquakes?
oversight on
Is
these.
there a consideration around using wood instead of concrete, given the comments that you've already made around maintenance costs and so on, around performance in a earthquake
Seismic.
event?
There's been, as the design progressed, considerable thought go into that aspect, and the design team have had a look at timber as a preference, but yeah, ultimately it hasn't been supported for the reasons outlined.
Because won't that concrete surface need to be replaced in a quake, or it will survive?
It should survive.
Okay.
Thank you. Phil?
Yeah, just one last question, sorry guys. This includes some ramps getting into it. So we're not just getting a bridge bang, because how far roughly out each side? Look, we're talking 20, 30, I can't quite see it. Because that's, if we're adding the abutment, the approaches in, there's quite a few bob either side, depending how far you go, because... Yes. No, the walking, the pathway.
All right. Phil, your specific question is
How far is the path out each side of the bridge? Because there's a lot of expense in that. Not the abutment, the getting onto it. Because if the bridge is 2 metres above the ground, we're not just going to ride our bike straight into the abutment. We'll be having to build a great big ramp out to get it up. Is that included in the price? Because that goes a long way towards.
So there's the
justifying
bridges, there's a platform at the end of the bridges, and then there's ramps
As
at
part
either
of
end,
it.
from both directions.
Okay.
Yeah. And then part of the next phase of the wider program is looking at things like the city to sea pathway and other connections into those.
So
Just glancing at one of the designs quickly, it
Yeah.
appears to be about in the order of 20 metres in total,
Yes,
So the fundamental question,
either side of the bridge.
that's right.
So
has it been answered?
Yes, 20 metres.
Yeah, I'm happy
No,
to
it's
move
not
it.
that. He asked if
Andrew?
the price has been
Happy
included.
to move it.
right. Okay. So we'll just finish with questions, but Phil, I'll note that you're happy to move it. Tim?
Just with regards to a bridge or any building, whatever it is, in the event of an earthquake, the building or a bridge, etc., its prime function is to allow the anyone in it or on it to get off it or to safety. It's irrelevant of the condition of the building after that. So just to clarify for the engineers around the table, that's what our design standards are for, isn't it? It's not about saving the building or the bridge, it's about the life as in saving the life. Is that correct?
I'm not an engineer, sorry.
Well, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I'm just clarifying, there's been a lot of discussion, but does the principle of a building or a
I think we can take it as said that our engineers and designers that are working on this
Yep.
understand
Yep.
those factors.
Yep.
And we've
Thank you.
heard that resilience has been taken into account in design. That was mentioned a number of times. So I think at a high level that probably addresses the issue. Now, Phil, you have indicated that you'd like to move this. Jake, you've indicated that you'd like to second it. So moved by Phil, seconded by Jake. Is there any discussion? Tim?
Well, thank you. I just really want to commend you for looking at the operational costs and when the discussion over timber and concrete. I mean, I've been going on this for years with regards to artworks. Whatever it is that we build, we've got to just try and reduce the operational costs because that is a burden on our ratepayers. So thank you very much for taking that into consideration.
Thank you. Yanni?
I think we just need to think about our environmental footprint, and just putting in steel and concrete bridges to me seems completely contrary to what we're trying to achieve as a city around sustainability. And there's plenty of research online around the impact of using timber and the embedded energy as opposed to steel and concrete. So I just feel really disappointed that we're not actually using timber to build, particularly things in the red zone, which we did, I think, want to be as sustainable as possible. And as a council, we've actually declared a climate change emergency. And here we are about to put a whole bunch of embedded carbon into our bridges that we're building for the community. So I'm not convinced that the maintenance of timber is necessarily a lot more expensive. I'm certainly convinced that the embedded energy in timber is a lot less than using concrete and steel. So from a sustainability point of view, I'm not going to support these bridges. And also, actually, the cost point of view, I cannot accept the huge cost that's been associated to these footbridges. I just think we need to actually think about how we actually make this money go further and farther rather than just spend it on 3 bridges. It's a huge amount of money for these pedestrian bridges. And, you know, regardless of whether it comes from the ratepayer or the taxpayer, I do think we have a responsibility to be prudent. And a number of submitters actually did raise that concern. In principle, I support the concept of these bridges. I think they will be an important thing for our community, but I would have liked to have seen a different construction methodology that was more sustainable and certainly a cheaper option.
Thank you. Sarah.
Thank you. And I think that sustainability is the key here. These bridges are going to allow people to walk and cycle across the Avon Otākāro River corridor in a way that it just isn't possible at the moment. And making those connections from one community to the next is key for people to be able to get around in an active manner. I think that the built materials of these bridges need to be as durable as possible, and while I like the look of timber better, this is such a tiny thing that is being built in comparison to other major projects such as the stadium, which will have an enormous amount of embedded carbon, and our other community facilities such as the pool, which have a huge amount of concrete involved in them, but that we support. So I think that getting on with these bridges now, as soon as possible, with this funding, it will be really important for our communities and really important for sustainable and active transport.
Thank you. Sam.
Yeah, thank you. I was just going to say, I think we should really thank the Christchurch Earthquake Appeal Trust for paying for this and not get too negative on the fact that there is a large cost associated with it. I think probably, look, I'm not an engineer, and none of us really are, except probably Phil, but and so the design stuff sort of sits to a side. But if you think about the financial side of this, the staff have already confirmed that they're not going to go out and put this as the price. They're going to try and get the best deal they can in the market. So it ticks a couple of boxes, and hopefully they can work with the trust to ensure that if there is any surplus, we can spend it in there. So this is a really good news story. We should be getting on with it and doing it, but it just reinforced, the trust have funded this. This hasn't come out of a ratepayer's back pocket, and I think that's the message that we should be sharing today.
Anne.
Yes, completely agree. That's fantastic, and it's about realising the vision and the objectives of the regeneration plan for the green spine. This is about connecting communities and providing opportunities for people to recreate in a positive way. So totally supportive of this. I think it's wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, I think a key point is that this is funding from the Earthquake Appeal Trust, which is paying for the capital. And, that certainly shouldn't be lost on anybody. And the other point which has been borne out, it's quite right that questions focused on cost and design and quite possibly materials as well as part of that design consideration. But what we're looking at here, as we've heard in answers to questions, are 3 bridges that are built to a resilient standard in a way that reduces OPEX. And of course, that will be the council's contribution to the ongoing OPEX. The CAPEX obviously been funded by CEAT, has already been well explained. So we're highly motivated, obviously, not to pay any more for these than we need to, because we would always want to be responsible in that regard, but certainly getting the balance right, particularly in construction materials, between capital and OPEX is certainly an area where we would expect to be focused. But, we're absolutely right in saying that this is a good news story. We are reconnecting communities on either side of the river. We're encouraging active transport in the form of walking and cycling. And in fact, this signals the start of what will be a huge amount of work over many years by council to develop the regeneration area into a really valuable asset for Christchurch. This is the start of making the most of the opportunity that this area presents to the city. I mean, this is actually a really exciting new chapter for the Avon River corridor, the Otākāro Avon River corridor, as we start to bring the regeneration plan, which has been the subject of so much community focus and discussion, as we start to bring that to life. So this really is a good news story, and I think it's important that we look at it and refer to it in that way, because there will be many benefits come from these three bridges. Aaron.
I just raise two things. One is I agree with Yanni's points around using timber as much as we can. Let's not forget that the majority of the greatest bridges in the world use timber as one of the major components, and they only drive things like trucks and stuff over those. So it is a great material. It has many benefits. But the other one is around the funding, and I'm not one of the people that can just sit around and say that, oh, it's great, we're not paying for this, this is donated money. We have a responsibility with donated money for projects like this to be as diligent as we can with $12 million for 3 walk bridges. It's a phenomenal amount of money. And so we should have an even stronger lens on money that people have given to an appeal trust, not just be happy to spend it. We should absolutely scrutinise it. And myself personally, I don't agree with there being $4 million per walk bridge spent. And the OPEX isn't that low either. $9,000 a year per bridge seems a lot of money for resilient bridges. It's $9,000. When did this just become chump change? We're not the chump, well, maybe we are.
So I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against?
No.
So that's Aaron and Yanni. They were the only 2 noes. So that's carried. Thank you.